The philosopher Nietzsche once said that truth is rarely desirable because it hurts, dismantles illusions, and tears us away from our comfort zones. The same applies to happiness. In a world obsessed with positivity and promises of instant fulfillment, happiness has become a simulacrum, a role that everyone pretends to play but no one truly understands. What happens when we stop chasing the ideal and start investigating what we're actually trying to numb? There's something unsettling about the way we talk about happiness today. It's become a performance, a social currency we exchange to prove our worth. But behind every forced smile lies a question that haunts us in the quiet moments. What if the very pursuit of happiness is what's making us miserable? What if the lies we tell about our emotional state are the very chains that bind us to a life of quiet desperation? This isn't about becoming cynical or embracing suffering for its own sake. This is about something far more radical, the courage to be honest about what we actually feel. Because somewhere between the Instagram posts and the motivational mantras, we've lost touch with the raw, unfiltered truth of our inner experience. We've become strangers to our own souls, actors in a play we never auditioned for. We live in a culture that has weaponized positivity. Every day, we anesthetize our anguish with a mask of well-being that grows heavier with each passing hour. Social media platforms have become theaters of false joy, where vulnerability is rebranded as weakness, and authentic emotion is filtered through algorithms designed to maximize engagement, not truth. The addiction runs deeper than we care to admit. We've become dependent on the validation that comes from appearing okay, from being the person who has it all together. But what happens to the parts of us that don't fit this narrative? What happens to the grief that lives in our chest, the anxiety that grips our throat, the emptiness that echoes in our bones? These parts don't disappear. They go underground into what Carl Jung called the shadow. They become the disowned aspects of ourselves, the feelings we're too afraid to acknowledge because they threaten our carefully constructed image of happiness. And so we smile when we want to scream. We say, "I'm fine," when we're falling apart. We post pictures of our best moments while our worst moments eat us alive in private. The hidden desire beneath this performance is achingly simple. We want to be accepted. We want to belong. We want to be loved. But in our desperate attempt to be lovable, we've made ourselves invisible. We've traded our authenticity for approval, our truth for acceptance. And the irony is devastating. In trying to be everything to everyone, we've become nothing to ourselves. The silent pain that accompanies this masquerade is the feeling of being profoundly disconnected from our own emptiness. We've become so skilled at avoiding our inner void that we've forgotten what it feels like to be genuinely present with our own experience. We've become tourists in our own lives, visiting our emotions only long enough to judge them, suppress them, or transform them into something more palatable. There's a scientific term for what happens when our inner reality doesn't match our outer expression: cognitive dissonance. But what we're experiencing goes deeper than cognitive conflict. It's what we might call vibrational dissonance, a fundamental misalignment between who we are and who we pretend to be. Neuroscientifically, when we fake emotions, our brain creates measurable stress. The amygdala, our ancient alarm system, detects the emotional falseness and floods our system with stress hormones. Our body knows we're lying even when our mind has convinced itself otherwise. The nervous system doesn't distinguish between a real threat and the internal threat of living a lie. It responds with the same primal fear, the fear of being found out, of being rejected, of being abandoned. Spiritually, there's a rupture in our energetic field. Our authentic frequency clashes with our projected frequency, creating what feels like an internal earthquake. It's as if we're trying to play two different songs at the same time, and the resulting cacophony is unbearable. This isn't mystical thinking, it's the body's wisdom trying to guide us back to coherence. The result of this internal war is a life characterized by stagnation, frustration, and self-sabotage. We find ourselves stuck in patterns that don't serve us, relationships that drain us, and pursuits that leave us empty. We can't figure out why we keep undermining our own success, why we push away the very things we claim to want. The answer lies in the gap between our authentic self and our performed self. When we live in vibrational dissonance, we send mixed signals to the universe, to others, and most importantly, to ourselves. We say we want love while radiating fear. We claim we want success while embodying unworthiness. We declare we want happiness while carrying the frequency of despair. And then we wonder why our manifestations feel hollow, why our achievements don't satisfy, why our relationships feel superficial. Happiness has become a commodity, packaged and sold through screens that understand our neurochemistry better than we do. Digital platforms have weaponized our dopamine pathways, creating artificial happiness loops that keep us scrolling, liking, and comparing, but never truly fulfilled. The dopamine hit we get from social media validation is real, but it's also shallow. It's like eating candy when we're starving for a real meal. The sweetness is immediate, but the nourishment is absent. We find ourselves caught in endless cycles of seeking external validation, each hit requiring more stimulation to achieve the same effect. We've become addicts to our own neurochemistry, slaves to algorithms designed to exploit our deepest psychological vulnerabilities. But here's what the platforms don't tell you. Dopamine isn't actually the pleasure chemical. It's the seeking chemical. It's what drives us to pursue reward, not what delivers satisfaction. True satisfaction comes from serotonin, from meaningful connection, from the deep fulfillment of living in alignment with our values. But serotonin doesn't drive engagement. It doesn't keep us scrolling. It doesn't generate revenue. So we're trapped in a loop of seeking without finding, pursuing without catching, reaching without grasping. We've confused the hunt for happiness with happiness itself. We've mistaken the menu for the meal, the map for the territory, the promise for the fulfillment. This creates what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. No matter how much digital happiness we consume, we never feel satisfied. We always need more likes, more comments, more validation. We're running faster and faster toward a finish line that keeps moving away from us. And meanwhile, our capacity for genuine contentment atrophies from lack of use. The escape from this neurochemical conditioning isn't about digital detox or spiritual bypassing. It's about understanding what we're really seeking beneath the seeking. What is the hunger that no amount of external validation can fill? What is the emptiness that no perfect post can illuminate? What is the loneliness that no number of followers can cure? Perhaps the most seductive lie about happiness is that we can control it. We've been sold the idea that with the right thoughts, the right practices, the right vibration, we can insulate ourselves from suffering. This isn't just naive, it's dangerous. It turns us into emotional fascists, tyrannizing our own inner experience in the name of positivity. Many people confuse spirituality with emotional control. They believe that being spiritual means maintaining a constant state of bliss, that any encounter with darkness is a failure of faith or practice. This is what we might call spiritual bypassing, using spiritual concepts to avoid the messy reality of being human. Carl Jung warned against this tendency. He understood that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires integrating our shadow, not eliminating it. The parts of us that we judge as negative, the emotions we consider unspiritual, the aspects of ourselves we're ashamed of, these aren't obstacles to enlightenment. They're the very material from which enlightenment is forged. When we try to control our emotional experience, we create what Jung called a neurotic split. We divide ourselves into acceptable and unacceptable parts, light and shadow, good and bad. But this division is artificial. It's a construct of the ego, not a reflection of reality. In reality, we are whole beings with the full spectrum of human experience flowing through us. The attempt to maintain constant happiness is exhausting. It requires tremendous energy to monitor our thoughts, police our emotions, and maintain our spiritual image. We become like soldiers in our own psyche, always on guard against the next unwanted feeling. But feelings, like water, find a way through the cracks. The emotions we suppress don't disappear. They go underground and emerge as physical symptoms, relationship problems, or spiritual crises. This is why so many people who appear to have mastered happiness are secretly struggling with addiction, depression, or anxiety. They've created a beautiful facade, but the foundation is crumbling. They've achieved the appearance of well-being while sacrificing the essence of wholeness. Neuroscience has revealed something profound about sadness. It activates brain regions associated with deep introspection and analysis. When we're sad, our mind naturally turns inward, seeking to understand, to process, to integrate. Sadness isn't a malfunction, it's a feature. It's the psyche's way of creating space for healing. Psychologically, sadness is an invitation to deep listening. It's our inner wisdom calling for attention, asking us to slow down and pay attention to what's not working in our lives. It's the soul's way of saying, something here needs to be honored, something here needs to be felt, something here needs to be healed. Symbolically, sadness represents the death of the inflated ego. It's the moment when our false self can no longer maintain its performance, when our persona cracks and reveals the vulnerable human being beneath. This isn't a failure, it's a breakthrough. It's the beginning of authentic relationship with ourselves. Spiritually, sadness is often the moment when the heart breaks open to let the light in. Every spiritual tradition recognizes this paradox, that our deepest wounds can become our greatest sources of wisdom, that our most painful experiences can become our most profound teachers. But our culture has pathologized sadness, turning it into a problem to be solved rather than a message to be received. We've created an industry around eliminating negative emotions, as if they were toxins to be purged from the system. We've forgotten that emotions are information, that they're the psyche's way of communicating with us about our deeper needs. When we welcome sadness with curiosity rather than resistance, something magical happens. We discover that underneath the sadness is often a deep longing for connection, for meaning, for authenticity. The sadness isn't the problem, it's pointing us toward what we're really seeking. It's the smoke that reveals the fire of our deepest desires. This doesn't mean we should wallow in sadness or make it our identity, but it does mean we should listen to it, learn from it, and allow it to guide us toward a more authentic way of being. Sadness is not the enemy of happiness, it's happiness's deepest teacher. The pursuit of happiness has become a modern tyranny, a cultural commandment that we must obey or face judgment. We've turned happiness into an obligation, a moral imperative, a sign of spiritual advancement. But this pursuit is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what happiness actually is. True happiness isn't a state we achieve, it's a byproduct of living in alignment with our authentic nature. It's what naturally emerges when we stop trying to be someone we're not and start being who we actually are. It's the fragrance of a life lived with integrity, the natural radiance of a soul that has stopped hiding from itself. But when we make happiness our goal, we've already missed the point. We've turned a natural expression of well-being into a performance, a spontaneous arising into a manufactured product. We've confused the finger pointing at the moon with the moon itself. Consciousness, on the other hand, includes everything. It welcomes joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, expansion and contraction. It doesn't discriminate between wanted and unwanted experiences. It simply witnesses, accepts, and integrates whatever arises. This is the difference between spiritual maturity and spiritual bypassing. When we stop pursuing happiness and start embracing presence, something profound shifts. We discover that we can be okay with not being okay. We find peace in the midst of chaos, stability in the midst of change, wholeness in the midst of brokenness. We realize that our well-being doesn't depend on our circumstances. It depends on our relationship to our circumstances. This isn't about becoming passive or resigned. It's about becoming responsive rather than reactive, present rather than distracted, authentic rather than performed. It's about discovering that the peace we've been seeking outside ourselves has been waiting inside ourselves all along. The real spiritual work isn't about achieving constant happiness. It's about developing the capacity to be present with whatever arises, to find meaning in difficulty, to discover the sacred in the ordinary. It's about becoming fully human, not perpetually happy. There's a story that illustrates the danger of living positively that comes from the work of physician and trauma expert Gabor Maté. He worked with a patient, a successful executive, who had built his entire identity around being self-sufficient, positive, and in control. This man had mastered the art of appearing happy, of projecting success, of maintaining the perfect image of a man who had it all together. But at 42, his carefully constructed world collapsed. Despite his outward success, despite his positive mindset, despite his relentless self-improvement, he found himself in the grip of a complete nervous breakdown. His body was failing, his relationships were crumbling, his spirit was dying. The very strategies that had made him successful were killing him. For years, this man had believed that showing weakness was failure, that admitting struggle was defeat, that anything less than perfect happiness was a character flaw. He had spent decades running from his own pain, building walls around his heart, creating a fortress of positivity that had become his prison. The breakdown was actually a breakthrough in disguise. It was his psyche's way of forcing him to confront the parts of himself he had been avoiding. It was life's way of saying, you can't keep running from yourself. You can't keep pretending to be someone you're not. You can't keep sacrificing your soul for success. The healing began when he stopped trying to be happy and started learning to be honest. He began to feel the grief he had been carrying since childhood, the fear he had been hiding behind his achievements, the loneliness he had been medicating with busyness. He started to have conversations with the parts of himself he had disowned, to welcome the emotions he had rejected, to embrace the vulnerability he had feared. This wasn't easy. It required him to dismantle his entire identity, to question everything he had been taught about success, to rebuild his life from the ground up. But as he did this work, something unexpected happened. He began to experience moments of genuine serenity, not because he had eliminated his pain, but because he had stopped running from it. The peace he found wasn't the manufactured calm of positive thinking. It was the deep stillness that comes from being at home in your own skin, from accepting all parts of yourself, from living in alignment with your truth. It was the happiness that emerges naturally when you stop trying to be happy and start learning to be whole. Alfred Adler, the pioneering psychologist, once observed that most human problems are fundamentally problems of belonging. When we pretend to be happy, we separate ourselves not only from our authentic experience, but paradoxically from others as well. We create a false self that can be accepted while abandoning the true self that longs for connection. True happiness begins when we stop performing and start feeling. It's not about maintaining a constant state of bliss or eliminating all negative emotions. It's about becoming whole, about integrating all aspects of our experience, about finding the courage to be authentic, even when it's uncomfortable. The path to genuine well-being isn't through the pursuit of happiness, but through the embrace of truth. It's about learning to be present with what is, rather than constantly reaching for what we think should be. It's about discovering that our worthiness doesn't depend on our emotional state, that our value isn't determined by our happiness quotient. This requires a fundamental shift in how we relate to our inner experience. Instead of seeing difficult emotions as problems to be solved, we can learn to see them as messengers bringing important information. Instead of judging our feelings as good or bad, we can learn to receive them as natural expressions of our aliveness. The invitation is simple, but not easy, to stop lying about your happiness and start telling the truth about your experience, to stop performing joy and start discovering what authentic contentment feels like, to stop chasing happiness and start embracing presence. This doesn't mean becoming negative or cynical. It means becoming real. It means having the courage to feel what you feel, to be who you are, to live from your truth rather than your image. It means discovering that the very feelings you've been running from might be the keys to the freedom you've been seeking. Where in your life are you lying about your happiness to be accepted? What would it feel like to put down the mask and show up as you actually are? What if the very authenticity you're afraid will push people away is what will finally draw the right people close? The challenge isn't to become happy. The challenge is to become honest. To live with such integrity that happiness becomes a natural byproduct rather than a desperate pursuit. To find the courage to be human in a world that demands performance. To be vulnerable in a culture that celebrates invulnerability. To be real in a society that rewards pretense. For the next week, notice every moment when you pretend to be fine when you're not. Notice when you smile, when you want to cry, when you say you're great, when you're struggling, when you project happiness, when you're feeling empty. Don't judge these moments. Simply observe them with curious compassion. Then, in the privacy of your own heart, tell the truth. Write down what you're actually feeling. Honor the complexity of your experience. Give yourself permission to be human, to be messy, to be beautifully imperfect. This friction between your performed self and your authentic self is the map to your emotional freedom. The lies about happiness have kept us imprisoned in our own lives. The truth about our experience is what will set us free. Not free from difficulty, but free to be fully alive within it. Not free from pain, but free to find meaning in it. Not free from sadness, but free to discover the gifts it brings. This is the paradox of authentic happiness. It comes not from pursuing joy, but from embracing truth. It comes not from eliminating darkness, but from integrating it. It comes not from becoming perfect, but from becoming whole. And it comes not from lying about our experience, but from having the courage to live it, feel it, and share it with radical honesty. The world doesn't need more people pretending to be happy. It needs more people brave enough to be real. It needs more people willing to say, I'm struggling, and that's okay. It needs more people who understand that authentic happiness isn't about having it all together. It's about being together with all that you have. Your authentic self is not a problem to be solved or a project to be perfected. It's a gift to be shared, a truth to be lived, a song to be sung. And somewhere in the space between your performed happiness and your authentic experience lies the freedom you've been searching for all along. If this conversation has stirred something within you, if it has given words to feelings you couldn't name, then perhaps you're ready to go deeper. There are others walking this path of radical honesty, others who have chosen authenticity over acceptance, truth over performance. You don't have to navigate this journey alone. Subscribe to continue this exploration together, because the most profound transformations happen not in isolation, but in conscious community with others who understand that real happiness isn't about the destination. It's about having the courage to be honest about where you actually are.